In the Western region, California, the Department of Cannabis Control proposes adoption of Conflict of Interest Code. The Department of Cannabis Control, DCC, is providing notice of its intention to adopt its proposed Conflict of Interest Code as required by the Political Reform Act. DCC is providing notice to the public of its intention to adopt the proposed Conflict of Interest Code. The proposed code designates employee positions that must file a Form 700 statement of economic interest and the financial interest that those employees must disclose. The Political Reform Act prohibits political officials and employees from using their official positions to influence governmental decisions in which they have financial interests. A conflict of interest code is intended to identify public officials and employees whose positions lead them to participate in governmental decision-making and to require them to disclose relevant financial interests. This process helps to identify and disclose potential conflicts of interest. More information about the Political Reform Act, including the nature and the role of a conflict of interest code, is available on the Fair Political Practices Commission's website. A public comment period has commenced starting today, which was January 28th, 2022, and will close on March 15th, 2022. Any interested parties or interested person's authorized representative may submit written comments relevant to the proposed conflict of interest code to DCC. All comments must be received by 5 p.m. PST on March 15th. In Nevada, a Nevada marijuana store fined $45,000 after self-reporting sales error. Nevada Organic Remedies, which owns and operates the Source marijuana retail stores, discovered that a budtender sold more than the legal allowable 1 ounce of cannabis to a customer in May 2021, according to the Las Vegas Review-Journal. The cannabis retailer was fined $45,000 by state regulators after self-reporting that an employee sold more than the legal limit of cannabis. Regulators initially considered fining the company $62,500, but walked back that amount after some discussion. According to Nevada Organic Remedies, a safeguard in the company's sales system that would have flagged the sale had been disabled. So, some personal comments here. This is a great example of when developing cannabis technology within the regulatory framework and what features need to be controlled by the technology solution and which need to be controlled by the user. The company should have never turned off this safeguard. I'm assuming that's what's happened when they said it's just been disabled, because a lot of point of sale companies will put this control into your hands as the operator. However, as we can see, this just costed this business $45,000, almost $63,000 if they didn't negotiate that violation down. So again, technology is a safeguard, but it can't be your crutch. In Oregon, the OLCC is producing a series of video-on-demand presentations to help the legal hemp and cannabis industries better understand new technical rules that took effect on January 1st, 2022. The first session, which is about retailers, sales limits, and higher THC edibles, is now available for viewing on the OLCC YouTube channel. These presentations are designed to explain what the following businesses are required to do to make sure they're compliant with the new regulations. Their intended target audience is for OLCC marijuana licensees, Oregon Department of Agriculture licensed hemp growers and handlers, and then other businesses that sell hemp to consumers in Oregon. In California, we have quite a bit of news and some local news that also heavily focuses on taxes. So, California bill would make unlicensed cannabis cultivation a felony. From the article out of MJ Biz Daily, one California lawmaker is hoping to recriminalize unlicensed cannabis cultivation with the introduction of a measure that would make it a felony to grow more than 6 plants without a permit. Assembly Bill 1725 by Thurston Smith, a Republican Assembly member from San Bernardino County, would change the penalties for unlicensed cannabis growing from a misdemeanor to a felony. If the bill were to succeed, law enforcement would have new tools at its disposal with which to fight the illicit market. Misdemeanors are punishable by a maximum of 1 year in jail and a $1,000 fine, though first-time violators usually are only fined, while felonies are punishable by 16 months to 3 years in jail. Smith said he introduced the bill to combat the enormous illegal grow operations that have cropped up in recent years in various parts of California. So my personal opinion here, there are other ways to combat this issue, and someone growing a handful of plants definitely will not fix the traditional market in California. Also, no one should be in jail for a plant. If enforcement wants to target criminal organizations that are trafficking humans or weapons, go after that, not the plant, especially for a felony for growing more than 6 plants. That's absolutely absurd. In LA County moves closer to licensing commercial cannabis businesses. Per the article, the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors agreed on Tuesday, February 15th, to move forward with the development and implementation of a quote-unquote equitable system for licensing commercial cannabis businesses in unincorporated areas. The board's actions means an end is potentially in sight to the county's years-long ban on marijuana dispensaries and other cannabis-related activities. The country's prohibition on marijuana dispensaries in unincorporated areas has been in place since 2010 and was broadened in 2017 to include the cultivation, manufacture, testing, and distribution of the drug for other than personal use. The framework authorized by the board allows up to 25 retail, 25 delivery, 10 cultivation, 10 manufacturing, 10 distribution, and 10 testing licenses. County officials said limiting the initial number of licenses will assure that the permits are being distributed equitably into the community. Up north in Humboldt County Board of Supervisors moved forward with cannabis tax relief. Supervisors are moving forward with providing local cannabis farmers some tax relief after a flooding of the wholesale market sent prices plummeting in recent months. The board voted 3-1, with 2nd District Supervisor Michelle Bushnell having recused herself due to potential financial conflict of interest, and 5th District Supervisor Steve Madrone dissenting, to give farmers until September to make payments on bills due this year, while reducing next year's tax bills by 85%. The board had previously offered farmers a reprieve by forgiving late payments on bills due in October of last year until May of this year. Today's vote, which will have to come back before the board for final approval at a future meeting, would give farmers until September to make these payments, as well as their second installment payments, which were stated to come due in March. The tax relief, which cannabis farmers maintained was crucial in trying to keep local farms solvent amid a crashing wholesale market, will result in the counties losing millions in budgeted revenue in an effort to help local growers stay afloat until market forces stabilize. The issue will come back before the board for final approval in the form of a resolution at a future meeting, at which time County Administrative Officer Alicia Hayes said she would also present options for corresponding reductions in expenses, saying they will likely include a hiring freeze and a suspension of one-time expenditures. On a personal note here, it was really inspiring to watch all of Humboldt County come together. For me, it was really emotional to watch a lot of farmers I've worked with over the years communicate their desperate needs to cut taxes to save their business and homestead. You may not know this, but a lot of these farmers have put liens on their homes to stay afloat in the license market. In the coming weeks, I will be releasing a podcast episode with Brittany Massaro, a compliance officer and business owner out of Humboldt County. As we watch this unfold, we should be watching what is happening in California. I feel this is a microcosm as to what will happen with federal legalization if we do not get taxes, regulation, and the barrier of entry under control for a fair playing field across the nation. Back down south, in San Diego, San Diego lowers some cannabis taxes to encourage more local production. Per the article, the council approved reduction from 8% to 2% despite IBA estimate of up to $4 million in lost revenue. Supporters said San Diego's tax rate on cannabis production facilities, which is among the highest in the state, is discouraging those businesses from opening in the city. Only 19 of 40 city-approved production facilities have opened, creating a gap in the local supply chain that forces some local dispensaries to truck their cannabis into San Diego from elsewhere. Supporters said other drawbacks of having fewer production facilities include fewer local cannabis jobs and greater opportunities for the local cannabis black market to thrive. Critics of lowering the cannabis taxes said San Diego's overall tax revenue, which have been affected more by the pandemic because the city relies so much on tourism, can't afford to reduce it in any way. They also complained San Diego lacks a cannabis equity program to help low-income people and minorities gain access to a lucrative industry that has relatively high upfront costs. I would say it definitely has high upfront costs, not relatively high, on a personal note. And another article out of California. Cuts to California cannabis taxes would harm low-income use, advocates say. Per the article, amid concerns that California's cannabis industry is overtaxed and on the brink of collapse, children's and youth advocates say cutting marijuana taxes would put badly needed social service programs in jeopardy. Small cannabis farmers and business owners have repeatedly asked the state to overhaul the industry's tax system as they struggle to stay afloat with rising operating and regulatory costs. As of January 1st, cannabis is taxed at a flat rate of about $161 a pound on top of a 15% excise tax, as well as a local cultivation, manufacturing, process, distribution, and retail taxes. The state raked in nearly $1 billion in cannabis tax revenue during the first 3 quarters of 2021. So not even a full year, $1 billion of tax revenue was generated. Service providers for low income and at-risk youth say they oppose any cuts because their programs rely heavily on money collected from Proposition 64, the 2016 ballot initiative that made recreational cannabis legal in California. And the last update out of California. Senate Bill 1097, Cannabis and Cannabis Products, Labeling and Advertisement. So Jason Beck, who is a reporter for the State of Cannabis NewsHour and also the longest retailer in cannabis history, brought to my attention Senate Bill 1097 on California labeling and advertising. Essentially, they're looking to modify the label requirements for packaging. Some ludicrous changes, such as a large yellow label requiring 12-point font and covering 1/3 of the packaging, is proposed in this bill. On a personal note here, we need to standardize when it comes to labeling. For an example, Colorado alone, we went through 4 to 5 different label changes in the first few years of legalization. And having more label changes only hurts the industries. And the reason for this is because a lot of times these manufacturers, distributors, cultivators, or the people that are supplying the cannabis need to be able to order in bulk, like their inventory labels in bulk, to save their per unit costs. So when you go through and do all of these label changes, then their old labels that they just purchased in bulk are now not compliant. And this is pretty detrimental to not only their stock supply, but also their margins. In Hawaii, Hawaii Senate Committee approves bill to legalize marijuana for senior citizens 65 and older. Per the article, a Hawaiian Senate Committee on Monday approved a bill that makes it so people 65 and older can automatically qualify for medical marijuana, regardless of whether they have a diagnosed condition that would otherwise make them eligible. Critics at state agencies say this effectively amounts to legalizing recreational cannabis for the older population without creating a broad regulated adult use market like the ones that exist in other states. The bill would make a simple statutory change to the state's existing medical marijuana law. As it stands, only patients diagnosed as, quote, having a debilitating medical condition, end quote, by a doctor qualifies for the program. This would be expanded to also include anyone, quote, who has reached the age of 65, end quote. I personally love this. I think it's great. It's just another domino that's following in Hawaii. And hopefully soon enough, we'll have adult use legalization in that beautiful state. In New Mexico, no limit recreational cannabis licenses getting approval. Per the article, quote, there's no limit to the amount of licenses that can be issued as long as they're able to meet the law in the Cannabis Regulation Act and the rules and requirements set forth by the division and the department, end quote, explained Victor Rise, Deputy Superintendent of the Regulation and Licensing Department. So no limit means the Cannabis Control Division can approve countless retail licenses, and New Mexicans could theoretically see pot shops on every street across the state. Quote, we have so much interest in the folks who are applying in the part of the industry, Rise said, and that's because it's an industry like no other, end quote. The Cannabis Regulation Act gives every local government the discretion to choose whether a pot shop can be located. Specifically, in Albuquerque, recreational cannabis can't be sold within 300 feet of a school or daycare, and shops have to be 600 feet apart from each other. On a personal note here, a no limit is interesting. I mean, let's take a look at Oklahoma and what happened there. There was essentially no limit there because they didn't put a cap at the state level for Oklahomans trying to obtain a license. And now we are seeing that entire market flooded. The price of all of their products dropped drastically. And now Oklahoma is trying to put a cap on licenses in that state to help regulate and oversee that industry or that market. A proposed change out of Oregon. Oregon legislation proposes cannabis sales tax hike. Per the article, Oregon cities and counties can currently levy a maximum local cannabis sales tax of 3%. But after some municipalities lobbied for higher taxes, the state legislature is considering a bill that would allow local governments to raise the cannabis sales tax to 10%. Senate Bill 1506, introduced February 1st by Senator Lynn Findley and Representative Mark Owens, received a public hearing in the Senate Committee on Finance and Revenue on February 7th. If ultimately passed, the legislation would raise the total sales tax on cannabis from 20 to 27% when including the state tax rate. The Oregon Retailers of Cannabis Association, ORCA, I love that acronym, has come out in strong opposition of Senate Bill 1506, and the organization sent an email to its members February 9th to urge them to contact their state leaders to express their concerns about the legislation. Another update out of Oregon, rulemaking for marijuana and hemp testing and lab accreditation standards. Per the OLCC email, the OHA, Public Health Division, and Oregon Medical Marijuana Program and Oregon Environmental Laboratory Accreditation Program are proposing to permanently adopt, amend, and repeal Oregon Administrative Rules in Chapter 333, Division 7 and 64 related to cannabis testing, cannabis laboratory accreditation, and concentrate limits. The amendment of the rules aims to address concerns raised in the Oregon Secretary of State Audit Report on Marijuana dated January 2019. A highlight of the report indicated that Oregon should consider requiring testing for heavy metals and microbiological contaminants, enhance test oversight, and ensure labs meet accreditation standards. Yes, I would say so as well. That is a very important standardization that is needed in all markets. For Washington, judgment affirms marijuana delivery service is not legal in the state of Washington. Per the advisory email by the Washington State Liquor and Control Board, recently, Thurston County Superior Court Judge Indu Thomas affirmed that a Washington State retail cannabis license violated state law by offering delivery services for cannabis. The court found by subscribing to the delivery service, the licensee invited the delivery service to come into its store to violate the law and was responsible for the violation. While the ruling is based on the facts in this case, state law makes it clear that marijuana delivery is prohibited for commercial purposes. Licensed retail stores that either deliver marijuana themselves or through use of a third-party delivery service is in violation of RCW 6950.401 subsection 1, RCW 69.50.4013, and WAC 314-55-110 subsection 4D. And now some federal updates. U.S. House passes Safe Banking Act. The U.S. House of Representatives on Friday passed the Safe Banking Act. This was the first week of February, which would normalize banking and financial services for state-approved cannabis companies for the sixth time, according to a roll call report. The legislation was included as an amendment to the China Competition Bill. It had previously approved the legislation as a standalone bill as recently as April and as part of the 2022 defense spending bill, but it was omitted from the final version of the final law. The proposal still needs to survive the conference process between the House and the Senate. Some lawmakers in the upper chamber, including Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and Democratic Senator Cory Booker, have said that they might not support the amendment without an effort to pass broader reforms related to federal cannabis laws. Crazy. I'm not very hopeful that this will pass, but we will see. Okay, proposed change. House Cannabis Banking Bill sponsor is quote unquote confident it will advance through Senate despite obstacles. Per the article, the fight continues to get the Senate to pass a marijuana banking reform bill, and the measure's House sponsor says he is quote unquote confident that the opposite chamber will finally take it up. Perlmutter, Democrat in Colorado, has been trying to get the Secure and Fair Enforcement or Safe Banking Act across the finish line for several years now, and his latest attempt is to pass it as a part of a large-scale manufacturing and innovation bill to which the cannabis language was recently attached in the House. In an interview with Yahoo Finance on Friday, the congressman discussed the prospects of his proposal, which has cleared the House 6 times in some form now. He says that while Senate leadership has insisted on passing comprehensive legalization first, he still sees opportunities to advance his bipartisan incremental reform. Federally owned utility company walks back threat to block electricity for marijuana businesses. A federally owned utility company that recently stirred controversy after signaling that it might refuse to provide wholesale electrical services to state legal marijuana businesses clarified on Thursday that it won't be taking such action. At the same time, it is seeking federal guidance on the matter. Advocates, congressional lawmakers, and a key Mississippi regulator condemned the Tennessee Valley Authority, TVA, for suggesting that it might turn off the lights on cannabis facilities operating lawfully under state policy. The prior statement from TVA, which cited federal obligations to uphold prohibition, came days after Mississippi's governor signed into law a bill to legalize medical cannabis in the state. TVA is a main supplier of electricity in the Mississippi northern region. But now TVA said in a clarifying statement on Thursday that it has, quote unquote, an obligation to serve our customers with safe, reliable, low-cost energy, and we will continue to do so. There will be no interruption in service because of this newly signed law, end quote. Well, there better not. And you need to come on board with federal legalization, TVA. In the last federal update, a proposed change. Hemp could have more THC under a new congressional bill that aims to fix regulatory issues for expanding industry. Per the article, a new congressional bill seeks to build upon the federal legalization of hemp by providing cannabis businesses with additional flexibility that's been sought after by industry stakeholders, as well as remove a controversial ban on market participation by people with prior drug convictions. Rep. Pingree, Democrat out of Maine, filled the Hemp Advancement Act on Tuesday. The legislation would provide several critical reforms, including by increasing the legal THC threshold for hemp products from the current 0.3% to 1% on dry weight basis. It could additionally upend the growing market for Delta 8 THC products by officially counting the isomer in allowable THC amounts. It would also address an issue related to THC levels for in-process hemp or work in progress. Businesses previously raised concerns about the THC threshold prescribed under existing federal statute because the process of hemp extraction can temporarily raise the THC content in a crop in a way that could make them liable for enforcement action. Under Pingree's bill, in progress hemp would not be subject to any THC limits as long as the final product doesn't exceed 1%. In my personal opinion here, updating the work in progress regulatory requirement is a big deal. This is a major area where hemp manufacturers run into problems, especially around new isomers such as Delta 8, which absolutely needs to be regulated and tested. This isomer is psychoactive, and every state is treating the isomer differently within hemp and cannabis regulatory frameworks.